Hello and welcome everyone to Red Planet Live. I am your host, Ashton Zeth. I'm elated to be hosting the Mars Society's podcast and leading the conversation about human exploration of the universe and the future settlement of Mars. As a longtime space enthusiast, I am passionate about STEM education and making humanity an interplanetary species. Thank you everybody for joining today and supporting Red Planet Live. Going to kick off today with another reminder. You heard me say it last month. We're going to say it again. The 2025 International Mars Society Convention is coming up, scheduled for October 9th to the 11th. That is a Thursday to a Saturday. This year, it will be at the University of Southern California, that's USC, in Los Angeles. This year, we are celebrating the 28th year, and the theme is Mars, the time has come. We will be focusing on Mars exploration, human settlement planning, and cutting-edge space technology. So make sure you go to that link right there to register. I do know that weekend in LA, there's some other fun events going on. So if you're going to be there, I highly suggest registering now. Find your hotel, get that stuff booked ahead of time while there are still some options available. And going to jump right in. So today I'm excited to be chatting with Matt Gjertsen, a graduate of the United States Air Force Academy and former Air Force instructor pilot with 2,500 flight hours. After leaving active duty, he spent over 4 years leading the training and development team at SpaceX before founding Better Everyday Studios in 2021. Matt has continued his career in the U.S. Air Force Reserves as a lieutenant colonel supporting Space Systems Command. Matt's 20 years of experience working with and leading high-performance teams all over the world has given him a unique perspective on what it takes to lead teams in this ever-changing world. He has previously shared those lessons with organizations like the X Prize Foundation, Lockheed Martin, and NASA. He and his team at Better Everyday Studios, there we go, are now on a mission to better train managers, build better companies, and create a better world. Matt, thank you so much for being here.
I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Excited to be chatting with you. I have to admit, and I'll have to tell everybody else here, how I originally stumbled upon your LinkedIn. What caught my attention was that article that you shared about being young, and you were featured in an article wanting to become an astronaut and go to Mars. So I do have a question about this later, but if you guys haven't already checked out his LinkedIn, we're going to post the link here so you can check it out. But Matt, really excited to be chatting with you. Thank you for being here. I know I'm going to learn a lot today.
Oh, awesome. No, I love talking about, it's rare that I get to talk about like the space stuff that is so much my jam for forever. Like I've kind of fallen into the leadership development space, the talent development space, which is a deep passion of mine. But anytime I can connect that with my original passion of space, then I'm all about it.
Perfect. Well, we're going to cover both of those today. So let's jump right in. We do a segment on the podcast called Question of the Day. Yeah. It's just meant to be an icebreaker. I promise. No right or wrong answers. Because you have a background in space and you were at SpaceX, I thought today's question was relevant. So give you a second to think about it. The question of the day is, if you could name your own rocket or spacecraft, what would it be? And I'll give you a second to think about it. So for those that are also listening, for context, think of the names we recognize like Falcon 9, Dragon, Atlas, Saturn V, the list could go on. But if you could name your own rocket or spacecraft, what would you call it?
I remember, funnily enough, I remember there was a discussion at SpaceX years ago when I was there about what to name, like to try to come up with a different name for Starship. Mm-hmm. And I don't remember what I said. Honestly, I think the first thing that comes to mind right now is Phoenix. I always love that. I love that creature as an idea. Yeah. So I'd probably go with that.
Phoenix. Okay. Rising from the ashes, reborn. Yeah. Okay. I love that. That's a good answer. I feel like for myself, my mind immediately goes to Orion because I love that constellation. You can always see it in the sky. The Greek and Roman stories about Orion, like that always kind of stuck out to me. But I know there is the Orion, what is it, capsule or landing period. So like, that's not original, but if I could name my own, if I had my own, that's probably what
you could blank slate it.
Yeah. It already exists. There wasn't already, a mission for it. That's probably what I would pick.
Yeah. I love it. That's a good one too. Yeah.
Well, I want to remind everybody, please, if you've got questions for Matt, submit those in the chat. We're going to sprinkle those in throughout. I already see some comments here. We're going to see what people want to name their own. rockets as well. But if you have questions for Matt, put those in there. But let's jump right in. Matt, I was mentioning in your bio that you were a U.S. Air Force instructor pilot. Tell us about your background and how did that experience, being in the military and the Air Force, shape your philosophy for training and leadership today in the corporate world?
Yeah, I mean, it started off, I became a pilot in the Air Force because of my love for space. It was funny. I actually grew up next to a small little regional airport, and me and my friends, when we were in like middle school, would take our bikes and go running around and really annoy the air traffic controllers and everything, as they were trying to make sure airplanes didn't hit us. And all my friends were like, oh, I'm going to be a pilot. I'm going to fly planes when I grow up. And so I, of course, had to one-up them and say, well, I'm going to fly the space shuttle when I grow up. And so that's kind of where it started. And then, if you want to be an astronaut, one of the best ways to do that is to be a pilot, or a good way to do that is to be a pilot. If you want to be a pilot, one of the easiest ways to do that is to go into the military, and in my case, going into the Air Force. So that's what got me there originally. And then when I was flying, it's interesting, especially connecting it to what I do now of leadership development. I think I like to say most people in training and development don't start off thinking that they're going to get into training and development. There's a thing called like an accidental trainer, and people say they fell into training and development. For me, I quite literally failed into training and development because of when I was in pilot training. When you finish pilot training in the U.S. Air Force, they rack and stack all of the graduates, and the first person gets their first pick, the second person gets their first pick, and then it just goes down the line. But they're running out of picks as you go. And for every class, they pick one person to leave behind and turn them into what's called a first assignment instructor pilot, or a FAPE. And being that you are you're 22, 23, 24 years old, ready to go out and enjoy the world. You're thinking you're going to join the Air Force and go fly all across the world. Staying in central Oklahoma is maybe not often that exciting of an idea. And so being a FAPE isn't normally something that a lot of people want to do, but they want to keep good people there. And so the reason why I say I failed into my current profession is because I failed one of my check rides during pilot training. And so that made it so that I was second in ranking of my graduating class, and first place has to get their first pick. And so second place usually gets FAPed. And so I got FAPed. I stayed at pilot training, ended up being probably the best job I ever had, other than what I do now. And I just got a lot of experience with true training. I think the vast majority of people, unless you have been in the military or you've been in professional sports, you've maybe never experienced real rigorous training. You do learning, you do education, you've gone to school, but it's very different from the very hands-on tactical nature, behavior-focused nature of what true training is. And so that experience really lent itself to what I do now, which I think I bring that kind of behavior-first, training-first lens to everything, where I'm always looking for like, what's the behavior that we're trying to change?
Okay. Well, speaking of training, tell us about your company, Better Everyday Studios.
Yeah, Better Everyday Studios, we focus on manager and leader development. So we go at it exactly the same way, where we're trying to train people and change behavior. So what that means is we kind of threw away the traditional lecture-focused discussions. We threw away the traditional one-and-done approach to bringing in a speaker and delivering training. What we want to do is we partner with an organization to help understand what are the specific skill gaps, the specific behaviors that you are seeking to change in your managers. And then we create a true training program to train them. So it's not going to be a workshop, rather than maybe what would traditionally happen is you have like a half-day workshop where all the managers come in and sit down in a room and do a bunch of stuff. What we do is we'll take that half-day workshop and break it up over like 6 weeks. So you're meeting for 90 minutes every other week. And in between, you're getting emailed messages and assignments. So you're getting all of this, spaced repetition. You're getting lots of hands-on working with the ideas while you're out doing your day-to-day work. And so it's really, again, like taking that different lens that I got from being in the military and applying it to this very traditional idea of manager development.
Okay. I'm thinking about my own experience. I work in sales. I work for a tech company, and in sales, there's always training. Every year or every new company that you join, they bring in an outside coach who's going to teach you new sales techniques. And so I was curious, like from your perspective, with Better Everyday Studios and helping to service and consult with space type companies, what are some of the hurdles that you've experienced with maybe engineers that are moving into leadership roles? Is there something that maybe private or commercial space companies is a specific challenge to them that you're helping to solve?
Yeah, I think it's a lot of these challenges are universal and felt in every company, but I think to your exact point, when we look specifically at, kind of the space industry right now, and especially the new space and growing space industry, there's a unique situation that those companies are in where, they're growing fast, but they're still small. So they're having to take a lot of their star performers, their star technical contributors, and make them managers for the first time. And I think that transition specifically is a point that we're trying to help with, and a consistent pain point. And it requires a number of changes. When I talk with my friends, I think the best way I've ever heard it described, this is from a previous engineer at SpaceX. He said, you spend your entire career as an engineer dreaming to be the person up at the chalkboard, right? You want to be up at the blackboard, solving the equations, answering the question. And when you become a manager, your job is to be the person in the back of the room asking a question. And that shift is really hard for people. One, it can be hard because a lot of companies don't even acknowledge that it's a change, right? They make people managers without really explaining to them what this new role is, and the fact that they do have these new expectations of them. But then it can also be difficult just from basically everything that you prided yourself in and all the things that got you promoted are now actually getting in the way. Because if you continue to be the one who has the answer, if you continue to be the one who tries to stay at the front of everything and control everything, then it's a slippery slope into micromanagement, right? And being the kind of person who creates an environment where nobody has fresh ideas. And so it's first about acknowledging, oh, I have this new role now, and then clearly identifying the simple new strategies that you need to have in order to think of yourself in a different way and think of the value that you bring in a different way.
I was thinking about your experience being at SpaceX and you're consulting these companies, especially companies that are startups, and they're in the commercial, the private sector. Have you noticed that there's been significant changes or differences between private commercial and government primes? I mean, I imagine they're facing some similar challenges, but the process and the way that they, move forward with, say, a mission or a project is vastly different. Can you kind of explain kind of the differences between the two? And is there, probably not, but you tell me, is there one blanket approach that, hey, we can help both with the same method?
I definitely don't think there's blanket approaches for sure. I will say, as all of us have probably been watching kind of, and reading about what's been happening with NASA leadership, and especially with Jared Isaacman going up for it and then getting taken down, and some of his writings, especially since he's no longer being looked at to be the administrator. It seems like he's been much more freer with being able to speak about kind of his thoughts of what he's seen at these different organizations. And I can say, I think listening to some of what he said really gave words to a lot of what I have witnessed in a lot of these organizations. Because like you said, I've been in small startup, or I've worked with startups, I've worked with larger companies, and I've worked in the government. And to me, I don't like the term wartime and peacetime, leaders, like wartime leader, peacetime leader. I don't necessarily like those terms, but I'll use them because I think everybody gets the idea of what we're talking about here, when you say that. And I think the biggest difference between wartime and peacetime, or new scrappy company and established entity or government, is in the new scrappy one that's always fighting for survival is more in that like wartime mentality. And what that really means is it's better to act than not act, right? Like it's better to act and make a mistake than not act but eventually be right. It's that old school like Patton quote, a good plan now is better than a perfect plan next week. It's because all of the impacts are close at hand and the feedback loops are incredibly small. They are much more ready to act right now because they need to, because if they don't, then they're not going to exist. Whereas with a larger organization, so many of the incentives align where it's better to just wait, right? It's better to do an extra study, to have another committee, to have another meeting, to ask one more person.
Bring in another person.
Yeah. Because I mean, when I was in the Air Force, when I was new in the Air Force, so this would have been like, late 2000s. I remember, or even when I was at the academy, we always joked that it was a one mistake Air Force, where meaning you were always like one big mistake away from ending your career. And that's just going to create a kind of environment where everybody's very reticent to acting, to doing anything. And because the feedback loops are long in a larger company, you have a couple $1 billion in cash, let alone the billions in credit lines sitting behind you. So this is a steamship that's moving along. And if you don't act and that's the wrong decision, chances are it's not going to impact the company until you leave that seat anyway. And so I think generally that, and all of these are just because of the environments in which they're in. With a smaller company, the feedback loops are smaller, the impact is more close at hand. So naturally they're going to be making faster decisions. And in bigger companies, all the incentives align to doing the opposite. And that's the big challenge. And I think that's the thing that you hear when you read some of these articles of people who are actually in those positions. It's how do we change those incentives to get people to act differently? Because all of them are great people, all of them are smart people, all of them are trying to do the best that they can do, but they're all facing different constraints.
Do you have any immediate recommendations on how we can kind of remove some of that red tape? We can be more agile. We can be more like those small startups that are feisty and they're going to do things quickly and they're going to make decisions, even if there's a potential mistake there. But we need to do it quickly so that we can progress and move forward. Is there a way that we could implement that in the government level, at the NASA level?
Now you're talking about stuff that's about 18 rungs above my pay grade. I'm sure there's
the tough questions here.
Yeah, no, but I mean, I think to me, as I've been thinking a lot, for years, the whole space community, I feel like, has just been like, what does SpaceX do differently? What's different about them? And then what's different about the other companies that are successful versus companies that aren't successful? And as I've looked at it and thought about it a lot, I think the key mindset, and this is a very extreme simplification of the mindset, but it actually came from a guy named Alex Hermosi, who's kind of a media personality out there right now. He just released a new book, and he has this phrase, end of day versus end of week. Right? When you're asking and he's talking from more of like a small business perspective. When you're asking, so maybe it's a small enough team where maybe it's all direct reports to the CEO, or maybe there's one rung and then direct reports. But when you're asking your team for something, the typical way you ask people to do something is, hey, can you get that to me by the end of the week? And he says, reframe it and say, why don't you say, hey, can you get that to me by the end of the day? Because most of the things that we need to do, not everything, certainly there's like big research programs, but most of the tasks that you have to get done don't actually take that long. It just takes us a long time to give them the time to get them done. Right? So there might be a thing that you could get done today, but you have all these other things on your plate that you were already planning on doing, so you don't get to it until Thursday or Friday.
Right.
And plus the boss said, get it to me by end of the week, so end of the week. So this is, like I said, super simplified, but the reason this matters, and I'll bring it all the way back to kind of the bigger picture example is, like we're doing some yard work at our house right now where we're doing some landscaping, and there was this thing that was going to get done. We're running like some electrical lines and things. So city inspectors have to come out. There's a thing that a contractor was supposed to get done. We thought it was done. We scheduled a city inspection. Turns out it wasn't done. They needed an extra day. So we couldn't have the city inspector come out. Turns out that city inspector couldn't come out again until the next week, right? So this one miscommunication of missing one day actually delayed the whole project a week. And I think in bigger projects, that is project management, right? Yeah. It's all these snowballing effects that just a 1 day late turns into 1 week late turns into 5 years late. Yeah. And I think the way the companies that are successful just viciously attack the critical path and treat every single thing as this is going to delay the whole project. And that's what you hear again and again more recently in kind of the discussions about Elon Musk's leadership style or Jensen Huang's leadership style. It's not that they are micromanagers of the entire company. They are micromanagers of the critical path. And they are taking the extreme resources that they have as the CEO and laser focusing in on them, on the thing that is holding the company back right now. And so generalize that out to managers at lower levels. I think it's about it for every manager. It's about always looking to understand what is the critical path item and how do I bring my resources to bear onto it. Great example. Somebody on my podcast, it was a retired colonel from Space Systems Command, and he told the story of how they were really trying to. So over the last few years, obviously, Space Force has been trying really hard to bring in other non-traditional companies, right? Non-traditional contractors to work with Space Force. And they were at a point where the limiting factor to doing that was actually getting security clearances. It was getting all the security paperwork ironed out so that these contractors could come on base and work with the Space Force. And he, as the group commander, kind of did a whole assessment of everything that was going on, and they identified this one link in the chain that was taking too long. They identified the item that was holding up the whole process, and they went to that person and said, why is this taking you so long? Can you go any faster? And that person said no, because the Air Force instruction says that I have to do it this way. So that's why it takes so long. So they looked at that Air Force instruction, figured out who the waiver authority was for doing it that way. Turns out I think it was like the Chief of Staff of the Air Force. So this group commander, next time you could fit it into a schedule, got on a plane, flew to Washington, D.C., and got the Chief of Staff of the Air Force to waive that requirement so that they could move faster. And so I think, so it's two things. It's one, having that mentality of every single day matters. And then every manager at every level needs to believe it is their responsibility to be looking out for their team and the people below them and constantly be asking, what's holding you back, and how can I bring my resources or my authority to bear to open that up for you?
Yeah, I'm curious. Is there a way that you incorporate that same mentality into your own day-to-day work life? I mean, I'm trying to think of examples of how I could do that as well. But not all of us, maybe those that are listening as well, are not managers. They're not CEOs. They don't have the ability to make those changes. But how can we, at a granular level, with the tasks that we do have, how can we incorporate that same mentality?
I really think it's about understanding, asking those same questions to yourself of what are my blockers, what are the critical paths, what are the most important things. I was actually having a conversation with a former colleague of mine who's worked at a lot of really successful startups.
Mm-hmm.
And I asked him the question, like what makes these companies different? What is it just everybody's working 80 hours a week? Like what gives?
Mm-hmm.
And his answer surprised me. He said, yes, but said, yes, we're working a lot, but that's not the key thing. The key thing is what we're doing with those extra hours, because during the day, everybody's doing their normal thing. Everybody's doing work. And then he said, the weird thing is, it gets to be 7 o'clock, 7 o'clock at night. The office kind of dies down, and that's when everybody, puts on their headphones. There's no meetings. Everybody's getting into their work.
Dials in.
And
Mm-hmm.
all across the company, he said, what every person is doing during that time, or one of the things that they do during that time, is evaluate, what did I do today? What do I have planned tomorrow? And based on what I learned today, is that still what I should be doing tomorrow?
Okay.
I think most of us, if we do that on like a yearly basis, where
Mm-hmm.
it's like I'm setting my, I have my New Year's resolution, or maybe we do
Yeah.
nobody does that daily.
Right.
Right. But they do. And it's that constant, that incredibly agile nature of always trying to figure out, like, what is the thing that I should be focusing on?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the thing that matters for all of us, is really realizing that if you have goals that you're trying to achieve, every bit of time matters.
Mm-hmm.
Focusing relentlessly on them matters. And what that gets you to, honestly, in my opinion, is that you just can't do very much. You can't focus on a lot of things. You have to pick just a couple things to focus on if you really want to be successful.
Interesting. Okay. It makes me think about, the lesson of like 1% better every day. How every day can I align to, again, what matters, what's most important? Am I still, you're taking that self-check. Am I still aligned to that? Is that still important? The task that I have to do tomorrow, is that still aligned with that mission or that goal? Tell me about your time at SpaceX. I mean, obviously, everybody here listening has heard of SpaceX, has an opinion of SpaceX. So tell us about your time while you were there, and any thoughts on where the company is right now, where it's headed. Are you optimistic? Are you critical? Are you I don't want to touch it, I'm just going to avoid the SpaceX topic?
I'm always optimistic. I will forever be a SpaceX fanboy for sure. I think they're, and I always take the stance of, who am I to be critical of anything? Like I may have ideas of different things, but like who am I? I honestly think Eric Berger, in his 2 books of
Liftoff
and Reentry,
yes,
he really nailed, I think, the challenge there of, like, I think so many people just love it, but it's a hard place to work. Like, and it's like, it's such a match, but it's really difficult. It's a vanishingly few number of people who can thrive there for the long term. And that's amazing. I couldn't, I was there for about 4.5 years.
Mm-hmm.
I loved it every day. I hated it every day, all in between. I mean, there was still nothing, especially for somebody like me, right? Like, I'm on the support side, right? Like I was in HR for the majority of the time that I was there. And still, you're having a hard day. It's like, geez, like, what am I doing here? And then you just kind of get up and walk a few steps, and you're out on the factory floor, and you're watching Merlin engines get built and aluminum getting rolled into rocket bodies, and just like, this is incredible. And just the level of people that you get to work with there, it was awesome. And I got to run orientation for several years when I was there. And so I welcomed in the vast majority of people for a good 18 months, basically for about 18 months, basically every new hire, at least in Hawthorne, I was the first person that was talking to them when they showed up, which was just super humbling.
Yeah.
But the thing I really got out of it is, like, one of the main things that I really tried to impart on them to make sure, chances are if they accepted a job offer, they realize this, but I think it's something that most on the outside don't always realize is, the mission is real, right?
Mhm.
Like they want to make life multiplanetary.
Yeah.
This isn't just a slogan that people are throwing out there. It's not a billionaire trying to have fun and burn a bunch of money. No, this is a real thing. And that's just incredible. And it's what we need more of, I think.
Yeah. And was everybody, maybe not everybody, but most people were tuned into that mission? I mean, it wasn't just some slogan on our website, but people lived and breathed it. We're all in this together because they had the same unified goal, the same unified mission, and that was the culture. Was that your experience?
Yeah, that was at least my experience. Yeah, I thought everybody was bought in. Everybody was all hands on deck to get stuff done. There were times. I was there back when the main focus was getting Crew Dragon launched.
Mm-hmm.
That was the big thing, and there would be these calls where it's hey, this is the critical path. We need help, and all of us in HR are well, what can we do? How can we help? And yeah, it was a blast, and there's high moments and there's low moments, and there will, at least from a professional perspective, it's going to be difficult for me to ever surpass the times of watching the first Falcon Heavy launch outside of mission control.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, come on, that was just, so I got to watch the first landing, the first relaunch, first Falcon Heavy, first uncrewed Dragon 2. Those were just such memorable experiences. And I think, yeah, the company has so many more resources now. They're doubling down on Mars. They're really going all in on Mars. And it's actually funny today as we're recording. So just today, Kiko Donachev, the head of the kind of the Dragon program, he tweeted out that SpaceX had just had its 100th launch today. And he said, for perspective, the 100th launch last year was in October. And so here we are,
beating those deadlines.
Here mainly because of the hiccups in the Starship program, saying oh wow, is SpaceX lost their luster? Is SpaceX not really able to really perform anymore? Meanwhile, they're continuing to accelerate what was already by far the most successful rocket program in the world. It's just, so they're an incredible company. They're an incredible group of people. And I'm, again, as we're recording, we're a few days out from, or I guess we're live too. So, we're a few days out from test flight 10. So everyone, I'm excited.
Yeah. And you still have it pulled up. You're watching them live. You want to stay tuned into what's happening.
Absolutely. I think probably I check I go to Reddit. I go to 3 Reddit pages, and they're all 3. It's our SpaceX, our SpaceX Lounge, and our SpaceX Master Race. Those are the only 3 Reddit pages that I ever go to.
Yeah, we know where to find you in Reddit now. Yeah, that's a good factoid. So the next time somebody asks me, I get asked stuff about the space industry, about people Elon, everybody that I talked to once, what's your opinion on Elon and what do you think about SpaceX? So for those that are saying oh, well, Starship is not working, it's not successful, they've had all these hiccups. That's a good reminder for those people that are potentially questioning SpaceX and are they really on the right path? Like you said, maybe they've lost some of their luster, but really the timelines and the facts show that no, they're still full steam ahead and outpacing everybody else.
Yeah, absolutely.
There's a question here about SpaceX. It says, what is a key feature you see besides being mission focused in the SpaceX new hires?
Interesting. I think, it'd be interesting to know if this has changed over the years. I would say it's a lot of it is the environment that they're put in. Gallup does this employee engagement poll. I've been doing it for decades, where they track employee engagement all across the world.
Yeah.
And the survey that they ask is they call it the Q12 survey, because these 12 questions that they always answer. And the very first question is, do you know what's expected of you at work? And I think that's really, really critical. And, there's always going to be exceptions, but I do think in general, SpaceX it creates an environment that is a lot like we talked about before, where it's always asking, like, what do we need to do? What's the next step? Are we doing the right things? And so I don't know if it's as much the new hires themselves or just the environment that they are dropped in that is incredibly purposeful and targeted that makes a big difference. Because that's, when I was there, the biggest example of this was when they dropped propulsive landing for Dragon 2. Everybody was so excited about propulsive landing. People had entire careers at SpaceX focusing on propulsive landing. And then as soon as they realized that's not on the critical path, or that's getting in our way, that's going to slow us down, they just got rid of it. They didn't even bat an eye. Just like, nope, not doing it anymore. Most companies aren't like that. Most companies are very obsessed with sunk cost and how much we've invested in this. So I think that environment is a big part that's different with the new hires that I remember seeing. And then, the hiring process is going to look for people who are going to be open to kind of the SpaceX culture. And so I would imagine that there's a lot more questioning authority, openness to new ideas, flexibility that's baked into a lot of those people, because the number one thing that's always getting harped on is you never want to hear that's not my job. Nobody should ever say that's not my job. And I think that was always probably very clear during the hiring process. And so I would bet most people who go there would never say that.
Well, thinking about SpaceX, obviously they're leading the commercial and industry right now for space. Kind of what's your perception about the space industry as a whole? We're obviously seeing the space race 2.0. It's the US and China. Obviously there's Russia and India are still kind of in the mix there, but there's this big push to get back to the moon. We were seeing those articles about the US is pursuing a potential nuclear reactor on the moon. But what is your perception of the space industry as a whole? We've got space race with China. We've got leadership changes within NASA, which still feel a little shaky. We've got the emergence of these commercial companies like SpaceX, but there's others, Blue Origin, Rocket Lab, Axiom, and the list goes on. What is your perception of the space industry as a whole right now? Are we headed in the right direction? Are there a lot of gaps that we still need to address? Are you optimistic about where we're at right now or the path we're on?
I couldn't be more optimistic. This is talking to, when we talked the other day, I mentioned how, when that article, maybe you were going to get to this later on, but the article from me in high school of wanting to go to Mars, I assumed when I was in high school that I was too young to be the first person on Mars. Right. I was, sitting there at 18 years old and just like, oh, certainly we're going to do this in the next, 15 years or so. I don't know if I can, of course that hasn't happened. Now I'm worried that I'm too old. But wow. Right now, the next few months, the next 18 months could completely transform space. We've all been, it's like with everything, like Warren Buffett talks about going bankrupt. It happens slowly and then suddenly. And I feel like, that's the story of SpaceX. It was slowly, oh, they can't launch rockets. Oh, they can't land them. They can't figure it out. Oh, this mistake is happening. And they figured it out, and then boom, it was off to the races. And now they're launching like crazy. I think my hope is that about 24 months from now, we could see what, 4 to 5 partially reusable launch vehicles in the US, right? We could have Neutron could come online, New Glenn could be being successful. By that, we're starting to look at maybe Stoke and Nova starting to get working. Starship by that point would be another one. Like it feels like it's taken a long time to get here, and everybody's just like, oh, wow, why hasn't another company done this? But we're right on the verge. The next 18 months could see a whole bunch of them pop off. So I am incredibly hopeful for that. Internationally, yeah, that's again, one of those way above my pay grade, but everything that you see is just like,
yeah.
That seems worrisome, for sure. And the good news is, I just finished reading Freedom's Forge, which is about the rearmament of the United States in the run up to World War II. And I think we're still in the same place in the US of, just like, because of our system, it's like, once we get it aligned correctly, it can just go so we have a lot of companies that I think are going to be doing a lot of stuff. To me, I'll say the one spot that I still feel like is questioning to me, that I don't see anyone trying to solve, is a non-Starship way to get lots of people into space.
Crew trying to address that at this moment.
Yeah, like getting, like, how, we're about to build all these space stations. Theoretically, it takes a really long time to build this. Where's the like double-sized crew-rated Dream Chaser that can take 15 people up into space? Like, as far as I know, like there's no one with that, even like as a conception. Because other than Starship solving all the problems and then being able to launch 100 people at a time or something like that. And that's the one spot where, and granted, I'm sure there's a reason for it. There's currently nowhere for a craft like that to go, and we are years away from that happening. But that's the one spot where, when I look out at all the companies, I'm like, who's doing this? Like, is anybody else doing this in a way that's not quite as revolutionary as SpaceX? Because it's going to be a while before we're putting crew on a Starship launch. Like, even if they got that flight rate up to like 100 launches a year, I still think we'd be years away from putting people on that thing, simply because, for all the reasons that everybody knows, if there's no, emergency escape system and everything.
Well, thinking about Starship, I think the last update that I had heard from Elon was 2028 is the estimated projected date for, first mission of Starship to Mars. That's the next window. Do you think that's realistic? Are we on time? Are we on track for that? Or like every other deadline, it's going to get pushed a little bit to the next one, which I think is 2031.
Yeah. It's tough. It's always tough. Again, I think it's really important to set as ambitious timelines as you can, because if you set a realistic timeline, then it's just, it's like the thing that Elon said a while ago. It's like, we specialize in making the impossible late, and how they do that is still by setting these unrealistic time goals, just to put that pressure and urgency on. My hope is that Starship is a little like Falcon 9 was with propulsive landing, where they figured it out. Once they figured it out, they figured it out.
Yeah. Right? We see like that sharp hockey stick, like, slow, and then they figure it out, and it's just off to the races.
Yeah. And so that's my hope. Obviously, there's so many, because everything with Starship and the way SpaceX operates relies on an increase in cadence. It's just the what they need, and if they can increase the cadence, then I don't see a problem. But if they can't, then I don't know. There's a lot to do. I'm obviously not an engineer, so but anybody watching it can know that there's a lot of really challenging technical problems that they're trying to solve. But if anybody has the people to do it, they do.
Okay, well, I appreciate an optimist. I don't want to live in a world where we're all pessimists. So I appreciate you.
Come on.
It makes me excited. You said you're not an engineer, but you are a pilot. And you wanted to be a pilot so that you could become an astronaut. And then, like you said, you could eventually go to Mars. Tell us, like, is that still a goal? Is that still something you're working on? Do you see yourself pursuing that as, the next maybe phase of your career, next chapter is trying to go maybe not the NASA route, but the commercial route?
Yeah, I 100% want to go to space still. if I go to space, it's very much got to be the commercial route. I think for me, and that's why I stay optimistic, is to me, all the paths remaining to me are paths that commercial space has to open up. And so whether that's tourist flights around the moon or a vast space station that I can go up to or things like that, I 100% want to go into space. I 100% would like to stay there for an extended period of time. But then, things like going to Mars, that suddenly becomes like a family discussion
Right. Yeah.
now, where we'll see where those discussions go. Luckily, they're still a long ways off, but I am still deep. I would be sad if I died having never gone to space for sure. I think I would be happiest if I'm one of those people that would love to die in space, probably. Not from like being in space, but
yeah, and not on the crash landing and
exactly.
I was thinking about a future potential mission. If the funds were there, would you pursue a suborbital flight like the Blue Origin, New Shepherds, or are you hoping for something a little bit more?
Yeah, I'll admit, as soon as, all power to the people the companies and the people who are doing it and the people who want it. I think it's amazing. They're getting a great view it probably because those things kind of popped up while I was at SpaceX. I always viewed them a little faddish, right? In that, in a perfect world, there's no reason to do that in 5 to 10 years because it's just as cheap to go into orbit. That's a perfect world. And so at least I've never been super interested in it, but then, you watch William Shatner come back completely lost for words, just crying his eyes out because of this amazing view with the overview effect and everything. And I will say, I remember a few years ago, I was like, this is what we need to do. We need to take, because of the overview effect and the studied idea or the studied effect that it has on people. If you are going to be a member of Congress, you have to go up in one of those. Like they buy it, that like the US government pays for you to go on, and we split it evenly between Blue Origin and Virgin Orbit once they're flying again. I think that's my idea for changing the nature of how governing happens at least in the United States, is if you're going to be a member of Congress, you have to go into space. And it gives you that higher level of understanding of like, oh yeah, like we're all here together. Let's work together. That's my idea for changing politics.
I love that. I haven't heard that idea, but I think that might actually be pretty, revolutionary, like for a lot of those people to see, again, the overview effect, to see that blue marble, every person, every person that's ever been a part of history is like all right there, and you're looking down on it. You don't see borders, you don't see conflict, you just see how fragile everything is, and you want to protect that. So I think that's a great idea. We're going to have to contact somebody,
Let's do it.
The legislature. Let's make this a rule.
With how we talk about budgets now in the US, it's a drop in the bucket. Like, come on, the amount of money that it would cost to do something like this is minuscule compared to these other things that we're doing. So let's do it. Let's go. Come on. And if you're not willing to do it, then you can't be in office. I'm sorry.
I think this could be expanded. Maybe not just Congress, but president, VP, especially if VP, is overseeing NASA.
Well, that's what what I really think is then you take it to the next level. If you want to be, the president or vice president, then you have to go on a Dragon mission and actually orbit the Earth and like really see the whole thing. I don't know I want to know what approvals from Secret Service it would take to do that, but
I'm on board. I say yes. Let's get working on this. I think this is going to change a lot about politics and how we see government support for space missions. So love this. Of course, I want to ask you. You have a podcast as well. In addition to running your company, your podcast is called Leadership Launchpad. What made you decide, hey, I want to get into podcasting? I've been a pilot. I'm a CEO of my company. I've done all these things. Why podcasting?
I have been listening to podcasts since 2004. And so like as soon as it was in the like iTunes app or whatever it was back then, like I was there. And I've always loved podcasting. I've always wanted to do my own, but it just took me forever to like really dive into it. And so then when I started my own company, it just seemed like a natural, like, hey, let's it's a marketing play. Like, let's figure out how to combine these two together. It's expanded a lot since then, because like when I first started the podcast, I was primarily using it as a way to talk to the people that I was trying to sell to. So I'm talking to heads of learning and heads of HR in companies. But now the focus is on talking to the people I'm ultimately trying to serve, which is the leaders in these companies. So I'm bringing on, founders, director level people at the startups that I kind of work with to get their perspectives on, you were an engineer, now you're a people leader. What was that transition like? And so basically we have a mix of guests. Of either our guests are these engineer folks who have made the leap into people management and kind of what their experience was like, or we talk to kind of the people who support those people. So that's there when it's the more traditional heads of HR and stuff like that at these engineering and more technically minded companies.
I'm always curious. I get the opportunity to talk with writers, presenters, communicators, and I always want to hear from their perspective, because we're in the same boat a little bit. How do communicators like us play a role in educating the general public, specifically, about space? Get asked all the time, what are your opinions on this, or what's happening with the space industry? So how do we make that information relatable, easy for the public to understand? It's applicable to the masses, and inspire, get people curious and get them inspired, and say, hey, this is something that I think is cool and I want to support.
This is something that I've thought a lot about, because I did debate in college. And so when I was in debate, every now and then you get a space topic and I would be really excited and want to talk about space.
Yeah.
And then I would lose every one of those debates. And I spent a lot of time trying to understand why that was. And I realized it's because, and I think this is one of the first things that we all have to do, is realize that most people just don't care about the things we care about, or they care about it in a very different way. When I hear that it is 100% certain that at some point an asteroid is going to hit the Earth and wipe out all life again, or it's definitely certain that the sun expanding is kind of more of a longer off thing, but like I hear about these things, and for some reason they just seem like this. Because it's a 100% certainty, I'm like, we need to solve this. Like, it feels like this existential thing. If life here extinguishes, that's it. Like, every poet, every actor, every science, like it's all gone forever. And for some reason that hits me really viscerally. And I think it does for a lot of people in our community, and it just doesn't for most people. And that's not a judgment. It just is. I think of there's this great YouTube video called Wanderers that came out like 8 years ago or 10 years ago, that it's a whole monologue of Carl Sagan. And it's showing these computer generated images and videos of what are real places in the solar system, but with humanity there. So it's, like if we have floating stations in the clouds of Saturn and stuff like that. And the whole monologue is all about how there's some small percentage of the population that for whatever reason has this wandering capacity to us, where we're always yearning for what's over there, what's over the horizon, what and that's been essential to the survival of our species, because eventually things change. Eventually this place that works out great for us right now isn't good anymore. The seasons change, the climate changes, the caribou move on, like whatever it is. And so there was some need for us to preserve, like in our DNA, this desire to move and expand, but it had to be a small percentage, because if everybody was always just picking up and moving, we'd never create civilization, right? We'd never move forward. And so kind of by happenstance or whatever it was, like there is that small percentage of us that have this, that are wanderers. We're always looking over the horizon, and it's just most people aren't. And so I know that that doesn't really tell you what to communicate, but it definitely tells you what not to communicate. It says, okay, I need to realize that different people have different values and care about different things. And so I think that's the first thing, is understanding your audience, understanding who you are talking to, what they care about, and then showing that space can help them, or space impacts them, because there's all kinds of ways that research, I mean, I think it's one of those things right now where, there's kind of a battle or a lot of discussion about basic research, or and more importantly, like superfluous basic research. Everybody's looking to say like, oh, that's a stupid thing to study. But I think if I'm remembering correctly, and I could be completely off base on this, but what's the new hot medicine right now? The weight loss drug, like GLP-1s,
like and Manjaro, whatever.
I believe that started with some crazy thing like studying salamander skin, or like it started as like this really crazy out there research. We never know what basic research is going to lead to. We never know what space, like what pushing the bounds of engineering the way space does is going to lead to. And so I think I think it's all about just like if you're trying to convince anybody of anything, you got to figure out what they care about first. You got to listen before you talk. And then through that listening, start talking.
Yeah, that's a great reminder. I get asked by people in the industry or people that don't care or know anything about space, and they say like, why space? Like, why is that important? And of course, my mind, I see images flash, and like, there's so many reasons. Like, let me just give you 100 reasons. But trying to make it simple and concise, and to your point, like relevant to them, what's important to them, why does that matter, and trying to make it so that you've hit a soft spot in their heart as well, so that they'll be interested and excited by it. Well, speaking of space, there's a lot of reasons to go to space, but I'm curious from your perspective, why Mars?
Geez, I mean, it's the only one that makes sense, at least right now. I mean, I'm like everybody, or at least people my age, so I was growing up when Mars Direct and, Robert Zubrin pushed the whole plan, and it just seemed so natural. I was like, yeah, of course, like this seems like you read the book and it's like, yeah, let's just do that. And so if and I think there was actually, I remember seeing some discussion on X a few weeks ago or a few days ago about this. Like the point obviously isn't Mars itself. It's like, that's the first, but we gotta go. We gotta be advancing the frontier, and that is the frontier. Venus is like a whole other thing. Honestly, Venus seems like the more perfect planet just because it's the perfect size, and it's just way too hot. It's way too hot, way too much pressure. Where else are you going to go? So I think it's just like the next, it is the frontier that makes sense. It's where we got to go. And then hopefully that unlocks more and more and more. Speaking of wanderers, one really interesting factoid that I remember in that video, there's a scene where there's a woman with just like a gas mask on, standing on a platform in a gas giant, and you really only know it's like a gas giant. And I learned through looking at that on Jupiter, the point in Jupiter's atmosphere where you're at one atmosphere, I forget which one it is. It's either you're at 1 atmospheric pressure, but you're at 4 Gs, or you're at 4 atmospheric pressures and 1 G. I can't remember, but the ratios are off. Whereas in Saturn, the point in the atmosphere where you're at 1 G, you're also at 1 atmosphere. So like theoretically, we could have these floating habitats that are just like Earth normal. In obviously the atmosphere would be toxic, but that's why you have a breather on.
Right. Oh, yeah, there is that part. But yeah, besides that, it'd be perfect. Well, no, that's great. I mean, again, everybody seems to have an opinion about why Mars, and depending on who you ask, sometimes they're the same, sometimes they're different. But I love what you said about, hearing about Mars Direct, and you're like, well, yeah, it's all right there. It's laid out.
Yeah,
Like,
just
we'll do that, and it works.
Let's just do that. Let's just do
Yeah,
that.
it's obvious. And obviously, with us on the podcast and Mars Society are pushing for that and want to see humans get to Mars. And to your point, like it's a stepping stone. Once we get to Mars, everything else is accessible, and we're going to see humans become interplanetary, and that's ultimately the goal.
Yeah, exactly right.
Well, Matt, thank you so much. I mean, I've learned a lot. There's a few kind of tips and tricks I'm going to take away for my day-to-day tasks, having that mentality, critical path. How can I be as efficient and work towards the passion or the mission? So thank you so much for coming on and answering so many questions today. I learned a lot, and I just really appreciate your time and sharing your knowledge and experience.
Thank you so much. This was a lot of fun. Yeah, hopefully some people got some stuff out of it. And even if a lot of it was just me up on my soapbox postulating about things that I have no control over.
We love it. We learn from that as well. Want to make sure we give a special thanks to our executive director, James Burke, our PR director, Michael Stoltz. Thank you, Leah, always behind the scenes and helping us out. And thank you, everybody who tuned in for today's conversation. Again, thank you, Matt, for joining. And we're going to wrap up today like we always do. And I think that Matt is going to agree with this, but my slogan is, the best is yet to come.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
There we go. Thanks, everybody. We'll see you next month. Have a great rest of your day, everyone.
Bye, guys.